Hi, I'm Pammy Woodruff with MakeItWithPam.com and theschooloflostarts.com. Today I'm going to talk to you about some very basic skill lessons that you can use to help you learn to sew on a sewing machine. Now, first of all, as you're looking at your sewing machine, you probably don't even know where to begin. You have no idea how to put the fabric in or anything like that. I suggest that you start on paper. Add no thread. You don't have to worry about threading the machine. You don't have to worry about anything like that. You will need a needle, and sewing on paper will dull the needle faster than it would normally. So save one needle for all of your paper sewing and switch to a new needle when you go to actually use fabric. First of all, when you're looking at your feet, there are two different shapes of a foot. There is the basic zigzag foot, which is the one here on the left. There's two toes relatively far apart, and there is a horizontal section where the needle goes through, a horizontal line that's relatively wide. This is to allow for a zigzag stitch. And the needle plate that's going to come on a machine like that will have a wide section here in the middle for a zigzag stitch. A straight stitch foot is like this other one I have illustrated, and it has one long toe and one short toe, as you can see here, but sometimes they are both long toes, but it's a very skinny slit in the middle that you are sewing through. This foot can only be used with a straight stitch, because if you were to try to use a zigzag, it would hit the metal of the foot and it would not work. The needle plate for a machine that is doing straight stitching, instead of having a wide section here in the middle, will have just a little round dot of a hole. Now, this can be good if you are trying to sew certain fabrics that like a silk, that tend to kind of suck down into the guts of the machine and cause all sorts of tangles and what we call rat's nests. If you use a single a needle plate that has just the hole for the straight stitch and use a straight stitch foot, sometimes that takes care of the issues. So the first step in learning to sew on your machine is learning how to follow a line. Lined notebook paper works well for this. I added some dark lines so you could see what I'm doing. But you would put the paper under the needle of your machine. You raise the foot, slide the paper underneath, and then lower the foot so it's clamped in place, and you stitch along this line. You can do this by hand, by turning the hand wheel, or you can actually empower it once you get up to speed and know what you're doing, and just stitch along each of these lines on your paper. And I've got a little diagram here to show you how to line up your foot, depending on if you have a zigzag foot or if you have a straight stitch foot. Either way it works. You'll just stitch along the line. So you say, okay, I can do that. What next? That's kind of boring, just sewing straight lines. After you've learned how to sew straight lines, and you can see I've poked holes in this piece of paper, you can learn how to do angles. And just draw yourself a little diagram kind of like this, a square spiral, and you stitch along straight till you get to one of the corners. Then you will stop with your needle down, raise the foot, turn the paper, and then stitch along the line again till you get to a corner. Stop with the needle down, raise the foot, turn the paper, lower the needle again, stitch along, stop with the needle down, raise the foot, turn the paper, lower the foot, and stitch again, and you keep repeating that. Now, if you want to get fancy at this stage, you can also maybe do a spiral, but all that teaches you is just how to steer. And we've got other exercises we can use to teach you how to steer later. The next stage is to be able to sew along the edge of the foot. So for this particular exercise, you will draw yourself several lines on the paper, and you will line up the edge of the foot. So here's my foot, and the edge of it gets lined up along the edge of the line, and then I sew right down the edge. On most sewing machines, this happens to be around 1/4 inch, but it really doesn't matter what it is on your particular machine. What you're doing is training your eye so that it's no longer just following along the line, but you're following what is substituting for the edge of the fabric. Then the final stage of this part of the project, you'll need to cut yourself some strips of paper, probably about an inch wide, and you're going to stitch with the edge of the paper against one of the lines on your throat plate. And you're saying, one of the lines on my throat plate, what are you talking about? On your throat plate, I don't know if you can see them here, there are engraved some lines, and they're numbered. And you want to learn to line up the edge of your paper, which is substituting for the edge of the fabric, along one of those lines as you are sewing. And as it keeps moving past the needle as you're sewing, that you will keep it lined up just like that. This is an essential skill when you're sewing. As you may know, there are things called seam allowances on garments and on quilts. If you make your seam allowance too big, your garment's going to be too small. If you make the seam allowance too small, the garment's going to be too big. This can be a big problem because you end up with something that just doesn't fit. If you're making a quilt, you can end up with a square that is too small or that is too large, that doesn't fit in with the others, that pieces don't match up, and some parts of it are too big and some are too small, and nothing fits together right. So that's why it's an important skill to learn to sew with lining up the edge of the fabric along the line on the throat plate itself. Well, that's about it as far as these basic ideas on how to practice sewing without having to actually sew. I hope this has been helpful to you. There are going to be lessons that I offer through the schooloflostarts.com and video shows kind of like this and video courses through makeitwithpam.com. I hope to see you either place, and I will be back with another lesson soon. Bye.